Peace, everybody. Welcome again to your favorite CHUCG Talk, your favorite payday show. I am Brother Lee. This is Brother Eric with me. Excited to be back. Excited to be yet doing another episode. Yes, and thank y'all who has been tuning in. And thank you for the questions. We have a lot of bell questions. You know what I mean? Brother Eric goes overboard with the bell. I'm not that way.
Y'all saw it. Y'all didn't see my hands. But I will say with bell questions, man, I really appreciate folks tuning in. We're getting more and more each episode. So that means that folks are watching. Thank y'all so much. We appreciate it. Continue to share your comments. And
please. Absolutely. So look, if you've been tuning in thus far, you know that we do a joke before we start talking about anything on this show. We got to start off with a joke. Generally in the past, some folks other than myself on the show have dropped the ball on a joke tip. However, today is my turn to share a joke. And dig this. All right. There was a teacher, right?
Oh, you talking to me?
No, I'm talking to my talking to my peers here. Right? There was a teacher. All right, all right. So look, there's a teacher asked a student to use the word beans. Okay. In the sentence. Okay. Green beans, string beans, right? Teacher asked to use the word beans in the sentence. The first student, they say, well, my dad grows beans, right? So the teacher's like, oh, that's so great. That's so great. You know what I mean? She's excited. And then the second student says, well, my mom cooks beans, right? So, I mean, the teacher's like, oh, no, you know, they're really excited. You know how the class was when you're in like second, third grade. And then the third student jumps up and just throws his hand in the air, kicks his chin, and says, we're all human beings.
Human beings.
Yeah, I could have done without that.
Y'all like that?
I could have done without that.
All right. Y'all, come on, can y'all stop laughing so loud so we can finish the show? Okay.
My fault. So yeah,
and
share your thoughts. Human beings.
Hey, y'all, can y'all send some new jokes in the comments? We need some new material.
All right. All right, y'all ain't get it.
Human beings. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Right.
You know, like beings, like
beings.
Beings.
Yeah.
You got that. All right, cool. So you got it. You just didn't think it was funny.
What's next?
Right. So look, that's our joke of the day. Folks, I want to give y'all time to stop laughing, but apparently I'm not going to be able to. We got to move on.
No, that was actually funny.
No, seriously though, in all seriousness, our topic for this week, if you tuned in last week, you know our topic for this week is political education, something that we feel very strongly about, something that we put a lot of weight behind, and something that's deeply infused and rooted into our organization at Black Youth Institute. So, of course, like we start off, we'll share our thoughts on political education at large. And then after that, we'll jump into our bell questions from folks who've tuned in. So, Brother Eric, I'll let you start on the political education, your thoughts, what you think of it. Or if you want to even give folks just a simple definition, if you will, for folks to understand who may not know.
Sure, man. Thank you. If I'm honest, I want to talk to people in YouTube land, and I want to share this with you. I know we talked before we got started. This topic is extremely important for me.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you why. So political education and in other ways, in other areas, you might hear popular education. Popular comes from the Latin word that comes from people, right? So it's the people's education. So I would consider, popular political education, that is education that comes from the people for the purpose of gaining awareness and collective consciousness so that we can move upon, act upon, and engage in the world that we see to create change. One of the biggest issues, borrowing from one of my teachers from afar, Paulo Freire, he talked about specifically popular education and political education being a tool that allows people to, one, ask questions. Without asking questions, we are relegated to the type of education that we're given. And that, what he describes as like banking educations, where people give you information and you show yourself as a good student by being a depository and giving back, right? That dollars or whatever, you know what a depository is. You put 10 cents out when you want it, you get 10 cents out, right? Like a piggy bank. But popular education looks like using different methodologies that come from the people. It might come through song and poetry. It might come through looking at newspapers. It's not just sit there the pointer to the board.
It's not in the class. I got you.
Exactly. Right. That kind of like, hey, good student, whatever. But it is based on questions. Absolutely. It is based on going outside of the frame of docile learning, where people are just taking what the person say as truth, rather than do that, posing popular education as a way to spur liberation by asking questions, by raising up what we are seeing in the world, so that we can have a critical eye and so that we can strategize to change what we're seeing. So that is a general sense of what political education is. Education from the people for the purpose of building awareness to move to action.
Yeah, really, I think that's a great definition. Only thing I would like to add, or not add, if you will, but capitalize on that you mentioned. We're talking about the educations that were kind of forced or spoon-fed, if you will, from preschool all the way up to pre-college. You know what I mean? So, and you mentioned something that was really strong. You talked about the agendas or the education that we do get aren't really used for the education we actually need, or what's necessary, if you will. There's a philosopher, y'all may know him, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson. One of the things he said, and I always hold on to this, he said when he was taught or when he learned to use it. He didn't learn just to pass the test, right? And I feel like that's the kind of education that we deal with now. Since now, granted, you know what I mean, when you're molding us to go into a direction, that's the right way to do it, right? But like you said, when you're not cemented to a direction, when you want to have the thought process to ask questions, when you want to be able to analyze outside of the box of a norm, then political education is the engine for it. So I agree, all in all, with the definition.
And can I just say this one last thing? Like, political education, like, it's like where general education is teach people what to think. Political education's job is to teach people how to think, to come up with conclusions together, and more importantly, come up with questions that beget other questions, And I'll say this, I used to do this when I do my preacher tip. When you break down the word question, right? Any word that you see that has shun on it, I-O-N, is a process of. A quest is what? A journey, right? So a question is, in essence, the process of journeying into a thing or exploring. So exploratory, experiential education is the best way to move to liberation, right? So when I say experiential, I'm talking about based on experience. So again, if education has to happen in a garden space, or education need to happen with spiritual practices as a part of it, as well as education that allows for, again, that awareness to happen, that is holistic, and that is focused on liberation, right? Like that's the way that I believe that political education has to happen. And we'll talk more about the importance, and I'll reference something that Baba Fred Hampton talked about with political education as well.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Eric. And folks, please give us comments, give us feedback on what you think. Continue to tune in and send us questions. Right now, it's a perfect time to segue into our...
Don't go on,
You're supposed to hit our bell question. You're supposed to jump in with the bell when I be like, our... So, with that being said, all seriousness, we got good bell questions this week, and I'm so excited. But this is the first week that we've had more bell questions than we asked for, and folks are really starting to be engaged. So, with that being said, I'm going to start out with the first bell question. This is from Maisha Taylor. Thank you, Maisha. Her question was, what can we do that is effective and what can we do that is effective and physically nonviolent? And I believe that's a general question in terms of what's going on right now, but also at the larger scale as well.
Yeah, you should.
So just so generally when you talk about being nonviolent, the problem, and let me take that back. I want to use a different word. When we mention being nonviolent, one of the things that come or pop in my mind when I think about it is what's next, right? So I've learned from the past, you know what I mean? You get action after, you get solutions after action, right? And a lot of folks have protested in the past. A lot of folks have rioted in the past. A lot of folks have peacefully protested. There's several different approaches. However, though, when you're nonviolently attacking something. I'm not sure if you always heard, right? And I'm not, this is by any means, no, am I not saying, violence is the answer, but I'm saying there are other options that I think as a black community we can take and approaches we can take that will genuinely make a statement from us and letting folks know, one, our power, two, our power together, and three, what our expectations will be going forward, and that's the set standard. But if I had to pick a way off the top of my head, I would say controlling the black dollar. If you ask me, I think the protests are one thing and a very, very useful tactic, very known tactic. But I think in this day and age, in this economy, I think one of the biggest ways we can make an impact is really re-navigating our black dollars to stay in our black community and teaching folks how to continuously cycle that black dollar throughout the community. And by that, I mean teaching folks how to network. And this can be folks that this might be Johnny from down the street, or this might be Rita who owns the business in the shopping center, right? But even still, I think I say to say as a unit, we need all pieces of the community. And I think if we can all get on a uniform strategy of learning how to re-navigate the black dollar, and I think we'll really, and I genuinely mean this, I think we'll really see a change. And I think folks will really understand where we're coming from when we, when we make that move. But that's one way I think we can be effective and physically nonviolent in this fight to liberation.
Yeah, I like that. And I think for me, in the earlier part that you spoke to, I think, first of all, for me, and I appreciate the question, Maisha, the question is when we talk about physical nonviolent, I like the delineation from just nonviolent. Right. Because my thing is, I actually don't believe that the idea that you don't fight fire with fire.
There you go.
I actually do think that you can tame fire by knowing fire.
Yeah.
So in the same way, if we understand that even, the way that we talk about the problem as food apartheid, right?
Absolutely.
Food apartheid or food apartheid, as some people pronounce it, that's state-sponsored violence. It's not different than somebody pulling out hoses or pulling out guns. You don't have to. In fact, that is a more insidious or more harmful version of violence, if you will, or aggression, because we don't know and we don't see that it is aggression. The fact that somebody can come to our community and open up a business without asking you, who've been here for generations, can I open up in your community?
Absolutely.
It follows a methodology that comes out of imperialism, and it is business as usual. So with that being said, to be violent or aggressive against it, you don't have to be physical.
There you go.
You can navigate the black dollar.
There you go.
You build your own institutions. If folks follow Black Yo Institute's work, you will see that there was a post that we put out from me, my reflections in particular around what we can do in this moment. I know we're tired of seeing people die, but also at the same time, we're dying just like Brother George Floyd, and I give thanks for those for the work that we do, and want to honor his life and the life of Sister Brianna and others who have lost their lives to gun violence at the hand of police officers. I will say, though, that we're also dying at the end of the fork. We're dying at the end of other instruments and tools that are used by corporations and government that kill us on the day-to-day. Ask my family, ask your family, did somebody pass prematurely because of diet-related issues? And knowing that it's unfortunate. I just had a conversation with folks about I think it's something like 36% of Americans, don't quote me on the numbers, are lactose intolerant. But we still have it on our plates.
Yeah, I'm not.
Almost every child has to get in school if they go to public school.
Yeah,
that's violent.
Milk make the bone strong.
You feel me? Exactly. And telling these false narratives. Yeah. So with that being said, it's like our pushing against that, our creating structures that disrupt and interrupt white supremacy in all the ways that it show up is the ways that we can do it. It is the dollar. It is building black wealth like we did in our last episode. If you didn't see it, check it out. And then it's also just building self-determined communities where we get to say what's in here. I think that it's physically nonviolent, but it's very much an approach to the violence that we have. And I'm also going to say, Maisha, and for anybody else, I'm not opposed to physical violence either. Yeah. If somebody's going, present a challenge that is physical, then I think we got to do what we have to do to build for ourselves. And like you said, I'm not afraid to say that, I'm not saying that we should move to violence. Right. I'm saying that we need to be strategic. Right. And just like Baba Malcolm talked about, in that strategy, we should use all means.
There you go.
All means
there you go.
At our disposal. Yeah. And so it's freedom and liberation for African people by any means necessary.
There you go. By any means.
That's all the means that we have. If that means taking white dollars and converting that and circulating it, if that's building institutions, if that's marching, what have you, but it has to be aligned with a strategy.
Right, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's well spoken, bro. I think it's well spoken, man. For the sake of time, I'm going to jump to the... I'm excited too, man. That was really good. I wish we could talk more about it, Maisha. That was a really good question, so thank you for that. So we're gonna move on to the next bell question. All right. So how can programs, individuals, incorporate political education into standardized white curriculums? And this question is from Alex Warwick Adams. Thank you, Alex. We really appreciate you for the question. Thank you for tuning in.
Appreciate it.
And we hope, we don't disappoint you in the answer. But go ahead, you and me, Eric, would you like to go first?
I can go first. I'll just say, generally speaking, I don't think that we can infuse political education into white curriculum. I believe that what we have to do is build our own curriculum outside of that. And when I say outside of that, I mean outside of the framework of public schools and even private schools, because I think that there's a certain ideology and framework that public schools come from. For example, I was doing a workshop and had to link into the Wi-Fi for city schools at Great Kids Farm. Okay. I was doing a presentation with some high schoolers, and before it started, I wanted to play Fela Kuti on YouTube, so that they can hear some, Afro beats, some powerful music. I couldn't find it, and it said that it was political language, and we couldn't do it. For a city school, it was blocked. Yeah. My music, black music, it was blocked. Yeah. So, but when I looked up other songs by Bob Marley and the Wailers, the only one I could find was Three Little Birds. Right. We want the softer stuff, right? That's why I'm saying it's those kinds of things that bring to my mind that, we can't do it within the context. But what I do think that we have opportunities of, and we've seen folks throughout the African diaspora show this, is engage in ethno-education. And ethno-education is this concept where people actually utilize cultural, rituals and cultural processes to teach indigenous language in addition to the public education that they're getting from the state. And so I feel like in talking about young people, what we can do is operate, function, create the structures for freedom schools, liberation schools, and for outside, like Saturday schools, if you will, to have people learn to supplement, if you will, and to combat the type of education that's happening in the school. And I just want to lift up, because the question came from Elevate, from Alex from Elevate Baltimore, that they also have a freedom school. Right. So I know that that's one thing, but I feel like it can't happen within the context, even if it happens in the physical building. I think it has to come out of, it has to be different from the paradigm that asserts the normal curriculum. Right. And it has to be a curriculum that is centered in political thought, but also gets people the tools, skills, and relationships to actually build power for our own liberation.
Right. No, I agree. It's the simple fact that I don't see us being able to infuse into a white standardized curriculum. It's generally, when it comes down to it, how we learn, what we learn, where we learn, and in the way that we learn, it's not a curriculum that's built for black people, black students, black youth directly. I even recall myself being a part of course, I grew up in Baltimore City Schools, and I just recall myself learning a lot. I recall myself learning a lot, right? But it's just like a lot of this stuff I got, and we talked about it earlier with the pass the test, and then furthermore, the stuff that I was supposed to take with me, right? It wasn't what I was supposed to take with me. It was the stuff that they wanted me to take with me, right? So when you think about it that way, no, it's real. When you think about it that way, it's almost like when we say infuse, right, or when we say how do we collaborate, I don't think there's means for collaboration. I think as long as there's some form of collaboration, you're going to ask for some form of compromise. And that's not something, you know what I mean, we're creating a curriculum for black youth, for black students. That's not something, you know what I mean, I'm willing to do. You know what I mean? So it's simple, and I think it's a simple word, you know what I mean? Or I guess to put in a lamer analogy, I wouldn't give, you know what I mean, if a dog is a dog, I wouldn't give him cat food. You know what I mean? So it's like, generally, you know, and I also wouldn't ask a cat to serve a dog food, if that makes sense. So I said to say, like, if you're going to build on your culture, your community, you know what I mean, your education, it has to come from within. It has to come from what we say earlier, talking about the popular education. It has to come from the popular political education. And it has to come from the people. You know what I mean? It has to come from the folks who will experience how you experience. They have to teach you perspectives that you're going to face into the world, because it's not... I hope I don't want to go too long on this, but it's not necessarily, I know it's not always intentional, right? Inside of the school system, there's no way am I, hopefully not attacking, but it is what it is on top of
Absolutely.
that. And we got to call a spade, and that curriculum isn't built for every student. I think that's the point, Blake. So I don't see us infusing or collaboration.
Can I say, I want to lift up a couple of examples. So I mentioned Elevate Baltimore with their Freedom Schools. Baltimore Algebra Project is another organization that are actually working within schools, but also teaching organizing skills and teaching young people how to advocate for themselves. I think another local example is Orita's Cross Freedom School in Northeast Baltimore. There's a liberation school that's run by Invisible Majority. So there are a couple of examples of people showing what you can do. There are many homeschool collectives and other examples where people are actually going outside of the framework of white supremacy to teach our young people not only about our history, but about ourselves, but also giving, you know, allowing young people to develop skills and roles so that they're actually able to be comfortable and strong in asserting our the power that we have and building more power. So like those are just some examples that I just want to lift up.
That's real. Yeah, and give thanks to all those who are doing the groundwork. Thank you for lifting them up. Folks, if you don't know them, go check them out. They're doing some amazing stuff that your youth can be involved in. So please go check them out. Please go check them out. Moving forward. So next ballot question. This is good, man. This is real good. Next ballot question. What ways can food and land sovereignty protect black folks from militarized policing and greedy corporations?
I think it's a good one. Can I take that one?
You go first. Yeah.
I'll just say this. I think that I said earlier that I was going to mention a perspective that I learned from Baba Fred Hampton.
Yeah.
He said that we have to, our movement work, we have to engage in political education so that those who we are preparing to fight colonialism don't turn into neo-colonialists, right? So, for example, we don't want to prepare people for liberation when people are actually preparing themselves. Without political education, people would be preparing themselves to perpetuate the same stuff that we're fighting against, right? So without political education puts things in perspective.
Right.
And it allows people to have a common language and a common perspective so we can move, you know what I mean, at a similar pace.
Right.
Not that people are going to agree all the time, but we at least understand strategy, we understand skills, we understand each other. With that being said, my answer to that question is, I think that who we need to be protecting ourselves from, not just militarized police and greedy corporations, is ourselves. And not because we need to protect ourselves from ourselves, but because of socialization processes that happen in school, outside of school, at our religious institutions, at our homes, from the TV, we're getting all this messaging that teaches us to be a particular way. And in doing so, we have to protect ourselves from militarized, the militarization of police. We need to, from greedy corporations, but ultimately we got to control ourselves. Protect ourselves from all outside sources. And I think the best way to do that is to engage in political education, engage in deep relationship building. Relationship is the basis of all movement. What we're talking about here with this CHUCG Talk work and this Black Land Food Sovereignty work is movement. And we ain't talking about hashtag movement. We're talking about actually a social movement that is based on relationships, authentic, deep relationships that's steeped in both action and reflection. Right? Yeah. So anyway, all that to say, that's how I would answer that question, generally speaking. So I'm sorry about that.
No.
I protect ourselves with knowledge. We protect ourselves with each other. Right. That's what my short answer.
Yeah. No. So I agree. I agree. And for those who think I always agree, I don't always agree with Eric at all. Yeah. Usually, this is probably the first 3 times I agree with him. But no. Seriously though, food and land sovereignty. For those who didn't catch episode 1 of Black Land and Food Sovereignty, sovereignty just means control. Those aren't familiar with the language. Sovereignty just means control. So if you sub that word, then it'll be a better understanding there for you. But food and land sovereignty for Black folks, I think it does. I think it does one of 2 things. The thing I can't stress enough is that I think it gives us a say so. I think it gives us an opinion. I think it gives us. It allows us to be able to make decisions on our own for us and by us, right? For us and by us. Yep. No, so that's one thing, right? And I think the second thing it does is let folks know that you have power, right? So you have the ability to say so, because you don't, even if you got power at times, your say so might not count, right? And it depending on which community or whatever you connected to. Yeah. But it gives us a say so, and it allows us to, it teaches us that we have power, and teaches us, it shows us that we can build power. However, I think those 2 things will, like you said, not just militarized policing, but any outside source. I think those things inside of the political education, I think it's easy for us to, after having that training and those deep relationships, to buy organically too. I want to be clear, to organically create the kinds of processes and uniform, I guess, responses to the things that we set here, we set and we talked about, and the things that we trained ourselves on. So we talked about militarized policing. I think as a unit, it'll be a thing to have folks in place. This is and this is just speaking on control of land and food, but it'll be a place that we have this place to go to. This is our safe haven when something goes down. You know what I mean? I think it's just, I guess all in all, my short answer would be to know what's next. To know what's next at all times, and that comes from political education. That comes from really sitting down, helping each other train. That comes from constantly working to get each other on the same page, and constantly maintaining those sustainable relationships. So
before we go to the next one, can I just two things? So a couple of things. One, we have to have a very clear relationship with our history, right?
Yes.
Not a romanticized one that's like,
not the one we like,
so
right?
Great,
Exactly.
We need to be able to, what I consider, practice Sankofa, right? We need to be able to practice the art of, a part of our political education is, again, as I said earlier, we need to be able to learn how to think. So we're training our mind to see things a certain way, not necessarily to say a certain thing, not to be parakeets. But I think that what we do need, and this is like, for me, we got to build institutions. Right. So how we protect ourselves from police and from greedy corporations, build our own institutions.
That's it.
Right? You know what I'm saying?
You make that, and there's no, I don't think
that's
you can
what it comes down to.
That's exactly
that's what the whole point of political education. You have to build institutions that continually practice, the continuation of political education and the relationship building, but also just to have institutions that fight against institutional oppression. Like, I'm sorry to say it, but I'm just going to say it straight up. Marching alone is not going to do it. Protesting alone is not going to do it. We have to build institutions that fight the very institutions that we're fighting.
That's one way, but it's definitely a lot more organizing to be done to get what we want to get to as a whole too. And I think that's the tough piece. So we pretty much out of time here. I wanted to give Brother Eric some space to share, but before I close out.
All right, sure. So, like I said, man, I feel like we need to do a part 2. This was
I'm okay with doing a part 2.
Really, really good.
If y'all would love to see a part 2, please let us know, because, like I said, we got more bell questions, and actually, this is probably my favorite topic thus far.
Yeah. Also, just want to acknowledge, we got one question about good reads for political education.
Yes.
We don't have time to talk about it here, but we'll share it in our on our Facebook and IG pages, and then we also can share it in the comments. Rhythm has asked for that question. A couple of other folks asked for that question. So with that being said, speaking of political education for Black Youth Institute, by the time that you see this, we would have had our first Black Friday event, and where we talk about different approaches to Black liberation through the works of Baba Malcolm and Baba Martin and the movements that they were a part of. And so I just want to acknowledge that you can go and check that out. Just look on our page. You'll see the live. You'll see everything. On June 19th, June 20th, and that weekend, we'll have a series of posts. We'll have some lectures. We'll have some community conversation. And not just Juneteenth, but what we consider Marooneteenth, right? Lifting up these two narratives of one pathway of liberation by our own hands, by Black hands, and one pathway of liberation through the white pen legislation. So we'll talk more about that. We'll have some a bit of maybe like a watch party for this film that I think is amazing. You'll be able to see our flyer. Please keep tuned on information about that. But yeah, man, political education is what we do. It's steeped in the work that we do, and we want to make sure that we're continually building relationships that are about critical awareness and social action.
Yeah. Appreciate it. So thank you, brother. All right, thank you. Hey, I thank y'all for tuning in. I thank y'all for staying tuned. I thank y'all for the bell questions, and I just generally thank y'all for supporting us and continue to pop in and hear what we got to say and engaging. So do me one more for last favor, though, really quick. If you can take out your phone right now, there's this little square. It should be like a reddish pink color. It has another square inside of it with a little dot. It's called Instagram. You can get on that right now, and if you type in the @ sign and you put Black Yield and hit follow, I appreciate that. Please send your bell questions, and we look forward to tapping in with y'all and seeing y'all again on the 26th of this month, June 26th. See y'all again next payday.
Peace, y'all.
Cheers.